Every week I see the same question. Should I start SMMA? Is dropshipping still worth it? Is lead generation better? But that's the wrong question. The real question is, which model gives you the fastest path to predictable revenue with the least unnecessary friction? Because most beginners don't fail due to lack of effort. They fail because they choose a model that looks exciting but doesn't align with how money actually flows. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people will never make serious money online, not because it's impossible, but because they pick something that sounds good on YouTube instead of something that ties directly to revenue. So today, we're breaking this down properly. No bias, no hype, no this is dead drama, just structure. We're going to compare dropshipping, SMMA, lead generation, and we're going to judge them on one thing: how close they sit to revenue. Because the closer you are to revenue, the more money you make. Why people stay confused in the first place? Before we compare these models properly, it's worth asking something more important. Why do so many beginners stay stuck in comparison mode for months? It's not because they're lazy, it's not because they lack ambition, it's because they're trying to eliminate risk before they take action. They want certainty, they want the best model, they want to know with complete confidence that they're not choosing wrong. So what do? They watch comparison videos, they read Reddit threads, they scroll TikTok, they join Discord groups, they ask strangers what they should start. And it feels productive, right? It feels responsible, but it's not progress, it's disguised procrastination. I've seen people spend 6 months researching business models, 6 months learning the space, 6 months trying to avoid a mistake. At the end of those 6 months, they're exactly where they started. No revenue, no clients, no proof. The uncomfortable truth is this: most people don't need more information, they need a decision. Because clarity doesn't come from endless comparison, it comes from execution. So instead of asking which one is perfect, we're asking a better question: which one makes the most structural sense? And to answer that, we need a framework. Here's the revenue proximity framework. Before we compare anything, we need a lens. Because if you don't have a clear framework, you'll end up judging these models based on hype, trends, or whatever looks exciting on social media. So here's the lens. The closer your skill or business model is to revenue, the easier it is to get paid. The further away it is from revenue, the more friction you face. That friction shows up: longer sales cycle, lower perceived value, clients questioning your worth, or customers hesitating to buy. Let's make this simple. A logo designer sits far from revenue. They create something that might improve perception. It might make a brand look more professional. It might help long term, but it doesn't directly create customers. Now compare that to a lead generator. A lead generator brings in paying prospects, booked appointments, people ready to buy. That's not perception, that's revenue. That's the difference. One skill is indirectly helpful, the other directly creates cash flow, and businesses prioritize cash flow. So instead of asking which model is trending right now, which one looks exciting, which one are influencers talking about, we ask a better question: which one directly creates money? Because the closer you sit to money, the more valuable you become, and that's the filter we're using for this entire video. Part 1: Dropshipping. What is it? Dropshipping is simple in theory. You don't hold inventory, you don't manufacture products, you create a store, list products, and when someone buys, your supplier ships it directly to the customer. On paper, it sounds efficient. Low barrier, no warehouse, no physical stock, global reach. And that's exactly why beginners are drawn to it. It feels modern, it feels scalable, it feels like you can build something big without needing much upfront. But theory and execution are very different. Here's the reality. Let me make this practical. I've tested dropshipping seriously before. Not casually, not just watching a few tutorials and launching one product. Properly. Multiple products, multiple campaigns, serious ad spend. At one point, I'd spent well over $10,000 testing different products, different niches, different creatives, different audiences. And here's what actually happened: nothing truly took off. Some products showed early signs of life. A few sales came in, you start thinking maybe this is the one. So you tweak the landing page, you adjust the ad creative, you change the targeting, you improve the product description, you try a different supplier, you launch another campaign, and another, and another. But nothing breaks out. Not because dropshipping doesn't work, it for sure does, but because there are too many moving parts for a beginner. You're handling product research, supplier negotiations, website optimization, conversion rate optimization, ad testing, creative testing, analytics, all at once. You're not learning one skill, you're juggling 5 or 6 at the same time. And when you're new, that complexity compounds quickly. Now layer that with the financial side. Dropshipping sits far from revenue stability. Yes, you generate sales, but your profit depends on ad cost, supply reliability, shipping times, refund rates, platform rules. Margins are thin, very thin. You might send $10,000 worth of product and keep a fraction of that once everything is accounted for. And that's before refunds, before scaling friction, before ad account issues. Can dropshipping work? Absolutely. But it requires capital to test, strong ad skills, strong creative execution, a high tolerance for uncertainty. You're not building a skill businesses pay you for. You're building a product machine that requires consistent testing and constant adjustment. For someone starting from zero, that structure is heavy. Heavy systems are difficult to lift when you're inexperienced. That's not predictable leverage, that's volatility. Dropshipping does generate revenue, but it generates revenue for you alone, not for other businesses, which means you absorb the risk. You fund the ads, you fund the testing, you fund the mistakes. It's revenue, yes, but it's unstable revenue. And in terms of beginner friendliness and predictability, dropshipping ranks lowest of all three. Now let's talk about SMMA. This one's interesting because on the surface, SMMA sounds close to revenue. You're helping businesses with marketing. You're managing platforms where customers hang out. It feels modern, relevant, in demand. But here's the issue. Most beginners misunderstand what they're actually selling. What most SMMA beginners actually do. They say, I run your Instagram, I manage your content, I grow your page, and this is where things go wrong. Because managing content is not revenue. Posting consistently is not revenue. Likes are not revenue. Views are not revenue. Awareness by itself is not revenue. Those things might contribute indirectly over time, but indirectly is the key word. When you sell something that isn't clearly tied to money coming into the business, clients start questioning your value. They'll ask, are these posts actually doing anything? Why are we paying you for this? Can we cut this out for now? That's why most beginner SMMA agencies struggle with retention. They're selling activity, not outcome, and activity is easy to replace. The higher level version of SMMA. Now here's the nuance. If your SMMA offer is we run paid ads and generate booked appointments, then you're not really doing traditional social media management. You're doing customer acquisition. You're generating leads. That changes everything because now you're tied directly to revenue. So your problem isn't SMMA as a label, the problem is how beginners execute it. If your service doesn't clearly move revenue, it becomes a nice to have. And nice to haves are always the first thing to get cut out. In conclusion, SMMA can be strong, but only when it's tied to measurable revenue. Pure content management, low revenue proximity. Performance based acquisition, high revenue proximity. So SMMA sits in the middle, not weak, not dominant. Execution determines everything. Now let's talk about lead generation. This is the cleanest model for beginners for one simple reason. It sits directly on revenue. No fluff, no brand storytelling, no long-term awareness strategy. Just this. Beginners give you money, you give them potential customers. That's it. And customers equal revenue, which means if you perform, you're not an expense, you're an asset. Why businesses love lead generation? Imagine you're a roofer. You close jobs worth $6,000 to $12,000. If someone brings you 20 booked roof replacements in the month and you close even 4, that's $24,000 in revenue. Now, if that service costs $1,500 to $2,000, that's obvious ROI. You don't need to convince someone emotionally. That math does the selling. That's obvious ROI. That's the power of revenue proximity. Why it's easier for beginners. Lead generation has low startup cost, no inventory, no manufacturing, no shipping, no customer service headaches. You need a simple niche specific website, a clear offer, outreach, and a way to generate leads. That's it. No branding empire, no product sourcing, no influencer partnerships, just customer acquisition. Here's something most people don't say. The first time you send cold emails for lead generation, it's uncomfortable. You'll refresh your inbox, you'll doubt yourself, you'll question your wording. And when replies don't immediately come in, your brain will assume it doesn't work. That's why most beginners quit. Not because the model fails, but because silence feels like rejection. If you can sit in that discomfort and keep sending emails, you're already ahead of 90% of people trying to make money online. Because lead generation isn't blocked by capital, it's blocked by consistency. Now let's compare all three. Let's zoom out and look at this clearly. Dropshipping, you fund the risk, you pay for ads up front, you deal with thin margins, you depend heavily on platforms, suppliers, and algorithms. When things work, it can scale fast. But when things break, they break quickly. it's volatile. SMMA, you risk being positioned as the poster, the content manager, the person keeping the account active. Unless your offer is directly tied to revenue, you struggle to justify your value. Client retention can be shaky. If results aren't clearly measurable, you become a nice to have. Lead generation, you sell revenue, you measure ROI clearly, you generate booked calls or paying customers. When you perform, you're not an expense, you're an asset. So which one actually makes money? Well, all three can. The better question is, which one gives the beginner the highest probability of predictable income with the least structural friction? And that's lead generation, because it sits closest to revenue without requiring large capital, inventory, or platform dependence. Now let's zoom out for a second. Notice the pattern. The models that consistently win, the ones that last, the ones that create a stable income are directly tied to revenue. Not engagement, not aesthetics, not trends, revenue. And this isn't just about business models. This is about how value works in the real world. The models that struggle over time are usually tied to perception, platform momentum, or arbitrage. Perception-based models rely on branding and visibility. Trend-based models rely on timing and hype. Arbitrage-based models rely on exploiting short-term gaps before they disappear. Those things can work, but they're fragile, and fragility is the enemy of long-term stability. Revenue creation is not fragile. Money flows toward revenue creators, always. Businesses wake up every day thinking about one thing: how do we bring in more customers? Not how do we get more likes, not how do we look cooler, not how do we chase the newest trend. And this principle applies beyond business. In an environment, a company, a team, a market, the people who become indispensable are the ones closest to outcomes, the ones tied to results. If you directly increase performance, profit, efficiency, or growth, you become protected. You become difficult to replace. But if your contribution is indirect, cosmetic, or optional, you'll constantly have to justify your existence. And when pressure hits, optional gets cut, outcomes get funded. That's the bigger pattern. In business, in careers, in skill building, tie yourself to outcomes, tie yourself to measurable value, tie yourself to cash flow, growth, or efficiency. Because when you're directly connected to results, your leverage increases, and leverage compounds. If your skill directly increases cash flow, you're positioned well. If it doesn't, you're fighting uphill. That's the difference between building leverage and chasing noise. And once you start understanding this principle, decision making becomes simpler. You stop asking what looks impressive and start asking what moves results. That shift changes everything. So here are my final thoughts. This isn't about trends. It's about leverage. It's about proximity to revenue. It's about reducing unnecessary friction as a beginner. You don't need a viral brand, a product empire, a perfect funnel stack. You need proof. Just one client, one revenue win, one system that works. Everything compounds from there. If you want structure instead of guessing, if you're serious about picking one lane and actually executing instead of jumping between models every month, inside my school community, I break down the exact funnels, templates, and systems for building lead generation properly. No noise, no gimmicks, just practical structure. Right now, it's just $19 a month, and I'll likely raise it as the community grows. If that helps you move faster, the link's below. If not, that's fine too. But whichever model you choose, make sure it's closest to revenue, because that's where the real money lives. I'll see you on the inside.